leadership identity after life disruption. It's a framework that takes the principle of the comeback code from insight into practice. So, transformation is not just inspirational, it's actionable. As someone who rebuilt her life and leadership after divorce and single parenthood, Deborah designed reclaiming me to translate the lessons she learned into practical strategies for leaders navigating their own challenges. And she's from United States of America. So thanks. That's a very good introduction of Deborah. And yes, the stage is all yours. Good luck, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you to the Ideas team and for the invitation and for creating space for conversations that truly matter. It's an honor to be here with leaders from around the world. We talk about leadership as strategy, vision, and execution. But what we rarely talk about enough is what happens when life collapses and you're still expected to lead. Because the meetings don't stop, the people still look to you, and the responsibility doesn't step aside. And that's a moment in our lives when maybe we've experienced a loss, a rupture, a diagnosis, or a decision that changes everything. And you might be thinking that your team has lost trust with you because they see you struggling and not showing up at your usual level. I used to think early in my career that leadership equaled perfection and vulnerability meant weakness. Over time, I learned that acknowledging my humanness made me more relatable. Now, if you're thinking right now, oh, great, another talk about resilience, don't worry. I'm not going to tell you to journal your way out of a crisis. Instead, to explain what I mean, I want to show you something. Every leader has a disruption point. What you do next becomes your comeback code. I want you to think for a moment, not raise your hand, just think of a moment in your life that split everything into before and after. Some of you rebuilt. Some of you are rebuilding right now. And some of you haven't fully admitted how much it changed you. And here's what I want you to notice. In this room right now, full of capable, accomplished people, we just acknowledge something that we rarely say out loud. Leadership doesn't pause for personal crisis. Now think of Simba from The Lion King. He wasn't ready to lead when everything was easy. He became king after losing Mufasa, after exile, and after his identity collapsed. Simba was told, the kingdom still needs you. And maybe your crisis isn't exile to the jungle, although some days it may feel like it. Maybe it's a betrayal, a divorce, a death, or maybe it's leading while breaking. Here's what I've learned personally and professionally, that leadership isn't tested in the climb. It's revealed in the collapse. I remember standing in my kitchen one morning, 3 kids getting ready, lunches half made, and 1 shoe missing, and thinking, I don't have the luxury to fall apart. I have to lead right now. Right now, the world was pressing down, but I had to stay strong for them. I didn't set out to study this. I lived it. After a divorce, I found myself a single mother of 3, still leading, still showing up, and still expected to be strong while quietly trying to discover who I was becoming. And my real leadership context came when one of my children was suffering a serious personal crisis. And while I won't tell you the details, I will tell you this. I would come home after leading for the day and drive into a situation no parent ever imagines. And then I would wake up the next morning and lead again. Even though getting out of bed felt like a Herculean task after staining my pillow with tears the night before. And there were moments where I would open my eyes for a second, forget. And then it would all come rushing back. The weight, the uncertainty, and the responsibility. And I would lie there staring at the ceiling, thinking, how am I supposed to lead today when I can barely stand? And eventually, I'd swing my legs over the side of the bed, because crisis doesn't pause your leadership role. It doesn't say, take off for a week, regroup, come back stronger. No. It says, they're still counting on you. And that's where the real tension began. Not out there, in here. I knew how to lead when I felt confident. I knew how to lead when I had clarity. And I knew how to lead when I felt energized. But this version of me was raw, uncertain. And I'd never led from a place like that before. So the real question behind the exhaustion wasn't how do I get through today? It was deeper than that. It was, who am I now? But I have a feeling I wasn't the only one that's ever asked that question. The hardest part of disruption isn't loss. It's the identity gap that follows. The version of you that knew how to lead just doesn't quite fit anymore. And that's the moment many leaders think anymore. I'm performing, but I feel disconnected. Or I'm succeeding, but I feel hollow. And most leadership spaces don't tell you how to lead from there. In conversations with leaders across different roles and in different industries, one moment comes up again and again. Life interrupts leadership. Here's what I've learned from lived experience. Crisis doesn't disqualify leaders. It reveals them. That's why I created what I call the comeback code as a lens for parents and leaders, because coming back isn't about becoming someone new. It's about reclaiming what was buried when survival took over. The first phase is stabilize. Before you scale, you have to ground. In an article titled How to Lead Through Personal Crisis Without Burning Out, Dr. Rajna Jan states that goal is to honor your values while hanging on to your humanity. And she talks about some micro strategies like taking 3 breaths before a meeting, or 5 minutes between calls to reset. When your energy is low, simplify and stick to routines. And more importantly, to set honest boundaries. To say, I'm at capacity today. Can we table this till tomorrow? Then comes reclaim. You don't become someone new. Reclaiming isn't about confidence. It's about retrieving what was never lost, only buried. You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight. Rediscover the things that have brought you joy and introduce them step by step. Retrieving your authentic self is a journey, not a race. Next, rebuild. You've heard that phrase, pressure creates diamonds. Well, it also creates exhausted leaders. Sustainable leadership comes from truth, not performance. And no one can do everything alone, especially during a crisis. This is the time to lean on your systems, your team, and trusted peers. To delegate more than usual, to cut out the non-essential, and to create margin in your calendar. Author, speaker, and renowned research professor Brené Brown has stated that the greatest barrier to daring leadership is the armor we throw up when we are feeling less than. Instead of hiding your heart behind bulletproof glass, Brené suggests that we integrate our thinking, feeling, and behavior. In fact, the Latin word for integrate means to make whole. This is the final step, leaning forward, as I mentioned before, with integration, not armor. Rebuilding is a decision. Here's what I know for sure. No one stays in collapse by accident. At some point, consciously and quietly, we choose to rebuild, to stay stuck, or to perform our way through the pain. Leadership after disruption takes a different kind of courage, a type of courage you never thought you'd have to muster. From Madame Curie to Nelson Mandela, history shows us the same truth. Crisis doesn't end great leadership. It creates it. I learned to embrace the messy, not because I liked it, not because it was noble, but because fighting it was exhausting. And that shift changed everything. And the place where I learned that the most wasn't on a stage. It was in a classroom. Before I ever started my company, I was an educator. And I thought I was there to teach lessons. But the truth is, that experience was teaching me. And I remember standing at the front of the room exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with teaching. I had papers to grade, lessons to deliver, and a team to lead. But what I really had outside of that classroom was a life that felt like it was unraveling. And those students would walk in, and they didn't need a perfect teacher. They needed a present one. So I made the decision in that moment to not have it all together, but to show up anyway. And that was the first time I understood that leadership isn't about being unshaken. It's about being committed. And there was a student that would come in every day carrying more than any child should ever have to carry. And you could see it in her posture, anxious, disheveled, and trying to settle while the rest of the room would move on. And one day, she turned in a paper. And it wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And I realized how often we do that to ourselves as leaders. We just miss the progress because it isn't polished. Across cultures, the phoenix doesn't rise despite the fire. It rises because it is reduced to ash. The flames act as a purifying force, burning away the old and broken and revealing a new, more brilliant version of itself. Your disruption wasn't a detour. It was an initiation. Leadership isn't forged in fire or in comfort. It's forged in the moments when you think you're not going to survive. What would change if you trusted this wasn't the end of your leadership story, but the ignition of a more grounded one? Not hardened, not smaller, just more real. Now imagine that everything you were trying to survive was shaping how you would lead. And eventually, you'll look back and you'll realize you've learned to let go of perfectionism, to be more empathetic, and to ask for help. I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, a city named after a bird that doesn't escape the fire. It rises because of it. And that metaphor shaped my life and my leadership. If any of this resonated with you, don't let it stop here. Let's stay connected and continue this journey. Because leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about presence. And the leaders that rise next won't be the ones that avoided collapse. It'll be the ones who come back stronger after crisis. They'll stand up with scars and they'll say, "This didn't end me. It shaped me." Thank you. Now, I believe we have time for answering questions. So I'm going to look at the chat. Let's see. Marco, what was the turning point that helped you start your comeback journey? Well, I think I tapped into that a little bit in my speech today. So after 13 years of marriage, I went through a very painful divorce. And I was living in Washington State at the time. And I moved back to Arizona to get family support. And I went back to school. I was working 3 jobs. And, when you're a single parent, you have to do it for your kids. You are strong for them and you do whatever it takes. And you find that inner strength. And that's why I talked about the comeback code. And through each phase, it helps you become stronger so that you can face those things in your life and in your leadership. The next question here says, what is one message you would like the audience to remember from your talk? I would like the audience to remember that everyone has a comeback. All of us experience some type of disruption. And as leaders, people look to us. And if we can acknowledge our humanness, it's going to help our team realize that we're human. And it's going to make us more relatable. It's going to teach us to ask for help, to become more empathetic, and to put systems into place so that we can help our leadership move forward. What mindset shift helped turn crisis into leadership? I think just finding that attitude of not giving up. In those moments that seem so dark, there's light at the end of that tunnel. And my grandmother used to have a saying, after a storm, the sun always comes out. And you have to realize that you're not going to stay in that crisis forever unless you choose to stay stuck. But leaders, we don't do that. We rise just like that phoenix bird. Is there any more questions? I see we've got about 63 people in the session.
So much for the great, painful and inspirational presentation. It really inspired so many women right here. Around the world, people are watching your presentation. Definitely, your inspiration to many, Deborah. Thank you for
Thank you.
joining this and sharing your painful and inspiring story with us. And keep encouraging other speakers by joining their sessions as well. And thank you once again for the presentation. And you have a great day.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.